Okay, we are live streaming. Just as a reminder again, we are live streaming and recording this, and then the chat will also be saved and appended to our summary. Good morning. My name is Rob Willis. I use the pronouns he, him. I'm today's moderator facilitator, and along with Janelle, we are the contractors that are supporting EPA and the U.S. Army Corps and supporting this roundtable. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support your participation. I want to immediately turn it over to Sylvia Quast. She is a special assistant to the EPA's Assistant Administrator of the Office of Water, Radhika Fox. And then following Sylvia, I'm going to go to Elliot Carmen from the U.S. Army Corps, and then we're going to jump right into the introductions. Sylvia, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And good afternoon, everyone. A morning for those of you in Nevada and maybe some of you in Idaho. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for this important regional roundtable on implementation of the term Waters of the United States in the Clean Water Act. This is our last of 10 roundtables that we've been doing over the last month and a half, and it is focused on the West, and I might add the Intermountain West in particular. Some might say that we saved the best for last. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the conversation. And I should note, I'm the senior advisor rather than a special assistant to the assistant administrator for the Office of Water, Radhika Fox, but she's basically the top person in EPA for all issues water. As some of you may be aware, this year we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. This milestone offers us an opportunity to take stock of the incredible progress we've made over the past 50 years. It's also a great time to assess ways to sustain that progress. While rivers in this country no longer catch fire, new challenges continue to emerge, and there are some old challenges that have persisted through the years. Waters of the United States in particular remains a critical issue. The definition of waters of the United States, sometimes referred to as WOTUS, is fundamental to the Clean Water Act and central to continuing to ensure clean and safe water that we all rely on. Given the importance and high level of interest on this topic, EPA and the Army have committed to conducting extensive outreach with stakeholders and co-regulators in the states, local governments, and in the tribes. The fact is, our country's water resources are incredibly diverse, as are the experiences and perspectives of those who are affected by the application of this term on the ground. So it's important that the agencies understand those experiences and perspectives, your experiences and perspectives. Today's roundtable and the other 9 that have happened are just one part of this effort. Rather than talking at you, our goal for today is to hear from you. That's why we asked you to choose the discussion topics you wanted to focus on for today's roundtable. This has been our approach for these roundtables because we fully recognize that different regions of the country have different concerns, and we want to get a better sense of those different concerns. One thing I should note here is that last fall, we proposed a rule about the definition of waters of the United States. The public comment period on that proposal closed on February 7th, and we are reviewing the comments that we received. My guess is we are probably reviewing comments from people in this room, in this virtual room that we have here, and those that are literally in the room there in Idaho. Although we can't consider any new information provided here today as part of that process, and emphasis is on the word on new, we look forward to hearing your feedback and experiences with how we've implemented that term so that we can do a better job of making sure we all have access to clean water going forward. I'm going to depart for a moment from the usual thing that the usual introduction that we give here to respond to 2 specific questions that you all on your roundtable wanted us to respond to early on. The first question that you asked us to respond to is, what do we hope to accomplish with these roundtable discussions? There are 2 things. One is to hear from you on specific ideas we can start working on now to improve our implementation of the Clean Water Act. For example, ideas that you have for encouraging conservation practices. This is something that we've heard from some of the other roundtables, but anything specific that we can start working on now that we don't have to wait for a rulemaking process to finish, very interested in hearing those ideas and moving forward on those ideas. And 2, hearing from you on specific issues that a rulemaking might not be the best solution for example, inconsistent application of the rules, We have been hearing this in some of the roundtables as well, that people feel that there's been inconsistent application, that somebody in the next county over is being treated differently when they have the same situation when it comes to waters of the United States. And my guess is you can understand how a rulemaking may not be the solution to a problem of inconsistent application of rules. So that's the answer to your first question. Your second question was, what formal and informal follow-up will occur at the end of these discussions? Specifically, will there be opportunities to meet again in the future to further our dialogue and discussion as issues present themselves? And I've got two responses for you on that one as well. First, on follow-up, the first thing we're going to be doing is catching our breaths after doing 10 of these roundtables over the last month and a half or so, and see if we've got some low-hanging fruit in terms of your ideas and suggestions that we can start implementing right away. It's very possible that we'll want to do some informal follow-up with those of you who suggested those ideas to make sure we're understanding what you're suggesting and perhaps get a little bit more detail than we have today. For example, your group is going to have 3 discussion topics. And my guess is that time's going to go by very quickly without necessarily everybody saying everything that they have on their minds or their thoughts about ideas and suggestions. And with regard to the second part of that question to us, yes, there will be opportunities to meet again. And one is coming up really quickly, the National Association of Counties meeting that's going to be happening in Colorado in July. We're going to be there speaking at that as well, and that'll be an opportunity to follow up as well, but that won't be the only one. So those are the responses to the 2 specific questions you guys wanted to hear about. I just want at this point to thank all of you for your time, and I especially want to thank the gentleman from the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, the Montana Association of Counties, and the Idaho Association of Counties for helping develop the agenda and being here today. I know it was not easy to coordinate. I have no doubt that this is going to be incredibly valuable conversation that we're going to be hearing from you guys. So for the sake of time, I'm going to turn it over to Elliot Carmen at the Department of the Army. Elliot, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. On behalf of Assistant Secretary Connor and Principal Deputy Pinkham, I do want to thank everyone for being with us here today. My name is Elliot Carmen. I'm a Water Resources Regulation and Policy Advisor in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. My office provides oversight and policy direction for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works program. The Army recognizes the importance and value of our nation's water resources, and we join the EPA in this effort to hear from you and understand your experiences and perspectives related to the definition of waters in the United States. The Army is particularly interested in gaining a better understanding of ways to ensure implementation of the definition of waters of the United States is clear and with the appropriate level of consideration for regional differences. In addition, we're interested in understanding any tools that may exist that may help with better implementing the definition. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is one of the primary agents of Clean Water Act implementation as they engage with the co-regulators of tribes, states, and local governments, as well as the landowners and stakeholders on a daily basis. And as a result, we know firsthand how important open communication is to implementing the Clean Water Act. And we look forward to hearing your input on the topics you've chosen for today's roundtable. So I want to thank you again. And I guess back to you, Rob.
Great. I want to thank the 2 special advisors for their comments. Sylvia, I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to spend 3 minutes or less talking to you about how I plan to use Zoom. So I'm going to make the faces really small again here while I pop up a couple of slides. The first slide shows the Zoom toolbar. For the half of you that are on the virtual meeting, I ask that you keep yourself on mute by pressing that mute button when you're not speaking. The second one toggles on your video on and off. Third button there is your participants button. That will allow you to see who is in the meeting. For the folks that are on the Zoom platform, your colleagues that are in person in Idaho show up as the local government center there. So that's what that entry is. The fourth button is the chat. I know that we're going to be using the chat. So I understand who wants to get into the queue for the folks that are in person, but that chat button can be primarily used for you to chat with one another if you desire, but also to reach out to Janelle or reach out to me if there's anything that we can do to support your participation. The fifth button there is live transcript. That allows you to see English subtitles if you desire. To access those, you press the live transcript button and you click show subtitles. If you have subtitles and you want to get rid of them, you do the same thing. You press live transcript and then you select the hide subtitle. The last one is the raise hand. There are two ways to use the raise hand feature. You can hit Alt-Y using the keyboard, and that raises your hand, and that indicates to me that you want to jump into the conversation, and I'm going to be using that during the discussion blocks. Or you can press the reactions button and then click raise hand. If that Zoom toolbar should look different or happen to disappear, if it looks different, the button should remain pretty consistent, but it may look a little bit different. If that toolbar disappears and you're looking for it, the way that I can get it back usually is either hitting the Alt button or by moving my mouse over the Zoom window. One last thing for the folks that are on the Zoom is I'm going to be asking that you rename yourself in the Zoom. That's really helpful for me as a facilitator. So to change your name, you hit the participants button, find your name on that list, hover your name over the list, hover your mouse over your name, you click more, and then you click a rename, as is labeled number 4 on the slide there, and then a dialog box will appear where I ask that you put your name, your personal pronouns if you desire, and your organization, and you click OK. So I'm going to ask that we do, folks take about 20 seconds to do that. And then Eric, I'm going to come right to you to kick off the introduction. So why don't we first see folks can rename themselves, and then we will jump right into it.
Can I talk while they're renaming themselves?
Sure, really quick. Eric, I was just going to quickly just let folks know that we were going to do 45 minutes of introductions and ask that folks keep it to about 3 minutes. And then we've got 3 discussion blocks of each about 30 minutes long. Eric, I am going to go straight to you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for establishing the ground rules. And most importantly, I want to thank the Wyoming Association for getting this thing off and running. I think I hope this is going to be a unique opportunity for all of us to talk and share about our concerns with waters of the U.S. from a pretty significantly large geographic area. Montana, Nevada, Idaho, and Wyoming cover about 440,000 square miles. And so you're going to get a broad spectrum of concerns that we have and issues that we have between the Army Corps and EPA on waters of the U.S. And so I hope it's going to be beneficial for all of us. Sylvia, it's 73 degrees and sunny in Boise. And I was so hoping that our last discussion would prompt you to get a last-minute plane ticket so I could take you out to dinner tonight after this wonderful conversation. But you don't know what you're missing not being in the room. I know we're missing you for you not being in the room, but we'll have to make up for that some other time. I want to talk kind of set the stage for why we did decide to gather together in this format. And it was based on some information when the roundtables were first announced, and it was presented. I think it's still up on the website for the EPA right now. And in essence, that the promulgation of the first stage of the rules for WOTUS are out. And we understand that we're not going to relitigate or discuss or add additional public comment to that round 1, 2, but it was always our understanding, and it was EPA's guidance that led us to this understanding, that there was a 2-step process. Step 1 was going to be the promulgation and introduction of the rules. Step 2 was going to be public feedback, roundtables, and discussions for what is going to be a more permanent rule structure in place in the future. So I hope that's the context that you'll accept our comments in right now. I don't think we're going to stray too close to the line of complaining about phase 1, but we're going to try and give you some constructive criticism for what we still expect to be phase 2. And I say that knowing that we're in an environment where no matter what you do, both between the Corps and EPA, there's likely your actions are going to be subject to litigation. The courts are going to determine both jurisdictional questions, definitional questions, and all this is going to be up in the air. So I'm going to start by saying, I have great empathy for you and your staff and trying to come up with a consistent definition that could be applicable all across the United States and deferential to the locals, because I think that's what you're going to hear from us, is that we want to hear some of that deference. You are in a tough position, and we hope that you will listen to us and take our feedback in anticipation of whatever happens with step 2 litigation and changes to either rules or definitions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to whoever is next on our list.
Great, thank you. And so I just put into the chat the questions we're asking folks to reflect on. Why are you here, and what are your top line issues related to the Clean Water Act and WOTUS implementation in the West? I've got Terry's up next, and then Micah, and then Bevan. So Terry, jump in.
All right, great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Terry Wolf from World, Wyoming. I'm here representing the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and I'm also a Washakie County Commissioner representing the commission. Our county is home to about 8,000 people, and per capita, our county is also the most economically diverse county in the state, from farming, ranching, oil and gas, bentonite mining, Crown Cork and Seal, home of PepsiCo bottling, Wyoming Sugar, just to name a few of the entities. The two top line issues that I'd like to address are as follows. Number one, we ask the agencies to pause their development of the proposed rule until after the U.S. Supreme Court reviews and considers the jurisdictional reach of the Clean Water Act and Sackett versus Environmental Protection Agency. The Supreme Court will have the opportunity to review their decisions in Rapanos and provide clarity on the definition of the waters of the United States. To avoid a rule that is inconsistent with the Supreme Court decision, the agencies should pause their rulemaking until after the opinion is issued. Second, the agency's interpretation of Section 101B is contrary to the Supreme Court precedent and the statute itself, and diminishes its importance in interpreting the jurisdictional reach of the statute. Contrary to the agency's suggestion, Section 101B is not a recognition of the state's authority to work to achieve the objective of the act. By assisting the agencies in implementation of the Clean Water Act or preventing pollution, rather the Section 101B, Congress identified and protected rights and responsibilities that have traditionally belonged to the states, land and water use and regulation. The Supreme Court has recognized that states have traditional and primary power over land and water use, and that Congress in Section 101B acknowledged and protected this authority. The Supreme Court held in Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County versus Army Corps of Engineers that allowing agencies to assert jurisdiction over an isolated intrastate water would result in a significant impingement of the states and traditionally the primary power over land and water use, raising constitutional and federalism questions. The court declined to do so, opting for a narrower interpretation. In plurality of opinion, Rapanos versus United States, Justice Scalia echoed his sentiment, noting that clean water is not the only purpose of the statute. So is the preservation of the primary state responsibility for ordinary land use decisions. Importantly, states exercise their authority to regulate within their borders. The state of Wyoming has primacy for implementation of the critical pieces of the Clean Water Act, including the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, state water quality standards and total maximum daily loads, water quality certifications, and non-point source pollution. Moreover, Wyoming has its own water quality requirements set forth in the Wyoming Environmental Quality Act, under which the state regulates discharges of the pollutants to all surface and groundwaters of the state. Wyoming's regulations, in effect, go above and beyond the Clean Water Act. This is in keeping with the spirit of the intent of the Clean Water Act, and the EPA needs to preserve the state's role in protecting water quality. When Section 101B is given its proper reading, it limits the proposed rule's reach. As the Supreme Court has noted, agencies are charged with determining where the land ends and the water begins. While agencies have discretion in drawing this line, they cannot do so in a way that infringes upon the state's rights to regulate land and water use. I thank you for your time in being able to introduce those first two top line subjects, and I look forward to having more discussion later on in this roundtable.
Great, Terry, thank you. Next is Micah, and then Bevan, and then Amanda. Micah, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Micah Christensen. I serve as the Natural Resource Counsel for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. In my position, I support the state's county commissioners on federal natural resource issues across the state, advocating for greater local involvement in federal decision-making. Mark Twain once quipped, "Whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting." However, in the arid West, we operate by a code, and we've been required to work together to solve our problems. We're very eager to engage in a productive discussion about WOTUS and its impacts in our communities, industries, and our way of life. So thank you again for involving us in this roundtable. I am hopeful that this is not the end of our engagement, but just the first of many conversations regarding such a very important issue to my state. I'm also excited to see you at NACO. So we'll see you there, Sylvia. Thank you.
Great, Micah, thank you. I've got Bevan, then Amanda, then Joanna. Bevan, please.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Bevan Lister. I'm a county commissioner from Lincoln County, Nevada. I'm right here representing the Nevada Association of Counties. My purpose here is to share our perspectives on on how these rules impact our citizens and how they could be better implemented to benefit everyone. Top line issues are the importance, and I'll echo a lot of what Terry said, the importance of waiting until the SACA decision is final before we move forward with any other rules or implementation of those rules. The other top line issue for me and most of my folks is the regulatory yo-yo. We're getting tired of being jerked around at the end of the string. Every new administration, every new ideology that slips into Washington, D.C. then has to change the rules, and our folks are getting real tired of it. There needs to be some certainty and some stability in how rules are made and in how rules are implemented. The overextension of the regulatory arm of the federal government causes tremendous heartache and cost to local governments and to our states. As Terry noted, and as I think you'll hear often, our states have substantive and strong legislation, laws in place, and the sovereign right to implement those laws. This continual tug of war over jurisdictional boundaries is challenging, uncertain, and just causes tremendous issues for all of our folks. Clarity. We need clear definitions. We can have clean water and we can have clear rules. And I think that's what we need to work toward. And thank you very much for holding these roundtables and letting us present to you.
Great. Bevan, thank you. I've got Amanda, Joanna, then Jeff.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Amanda Castor, and I serve as the director of the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. I'm here today on behalf of the state of Montana to offer our perspectives regarding the federal government's WOTUS rulemaking efforts. I want to just quickly extend a thank you to Montana, Idaho, Wyoming associations of counties who are integral in coordinating this roundtable. We really appreciate the state of Montana being part of this critical discussion today. While we always appreciate efforts to engage, this particular roundtable effort is ill-timed, given that the Supreme Court is presently revisiting WOTUS for a fourth time in Sackett versus US. From the state of Montana's perspective, any rule adoption needs to recognize and respect the state's role in preserving the integrity of our waters. The jurisdiction of the agencies is not boundless, as was specifically recognized by Congress in the passage of the Clean Water Act. The state has a role, and as such, WOTUS should not be used to circumvent state primacy under the Clean Water Act. Further, Montana is a partner, not a stakeholder. To that end, the Army Corps and EPA should have been working with us from the beginning, not making us compete for a seat on roundtables. Lastly, predictability and consistency continue to be an issue. Vacillating between different WOTUS definitions or adopting an approach that creates more ambiguity and uncertainty makes it difficult for states trying to implement their federal Clean Water Act responsibilities. Thank you, and I look forward to further sharing Montana's perspective with you all today.
Amanda, I appreciate it. I've got Joanna, then Jeff, then Brenda. Joanna?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. All right, so I'm representing the Association of Idaho Cities. Our members provide critical and essential services to their communities and create economic engines of society. Our members operate drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, other essential services facilities located on or near lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, wetlands, ditches, swales, and other features. Our member facilities have water management features both on-site with and without outlets that discharge to lake, river, stream, and many that interface with groundwater. Our members have an interest in the WOTUS definition because that definition will directly affect their activities and operations, including water management. The definition will affect the regulatory status of certain water features located on AIC members' properties, and in turn, our members' uses of on-site water management features and our ability of our members to maintain those features. Similar to the other stakeholders and partners that have spoken so far this morning, There is a need within our membership for regulatory certainty with regards to the federal oversight of jurisdictional waters. It's best carried out in a manner that protects the water quality, but also respects the constitutional limits of the Federal Clean Water Act. From AIC's perspective, the following elements of the WOTUS rule finalized by the agencies in 2020 provided more clarity and consistency when compared to the one immediately prior. There's also shared concerns with regards to the timeline to finalize the new rules. We echo what has been already said today regarding the timing of the issuance of phase 1 and the reality that the court will very likely lay out a narrow view of WOTUS jurisdiction, possibly different than what it is in the current phase 1 proposal. Now, stepping on to a few other things that I'd like to share from the Association of Idaho Cities relates to the climate change in the arid West. And that our understanding is that the implementation of the Clean Water Act programs, they're not to interfere with the state's water quality management and oversight, especially in the Western US. The framework for Western water rights, especially in arid regions, create very different jurisdictional issues and challenges compared to the Eastern water rights. Western watershed function and features in arid regions have different impacts to both navigation and commerce compared to those regions characterized by more consistent connectivity. It is vital that the agencies understand that both climate change and the state's water quantity management and oversight, especially in the arid West, will eventually determine the potential best attainable uses and overall success of the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act applies to both chemical and physical conditions, as is evidenced through certain sections and through required coordination with other environmental protection regulations, such as through the National Environmental Protection Act and Endangered Species Act. In those programs where physical potential is considered, such as under 303D impairment listings, 303E, 316A thermal variances, use attainability analyses, the limitations from physical conditions form the basis for revised goals, ensuring the best attainable uses for these physical conditions. Now, bringing this to on the ground and our members who are engaged directly with these activities, I want to also, this last, and this is my final point, I know I'm taking a long time, Rob, I would like to empower to really think, to encourage the agencies to empower to implement the programs at the community level. We see common sense regulatory frameworks and empowerment at the community level because it enhances effectiveness, efficiency, but more importantly, this enhances the trust between the community members and the local governments, and additionally enhances local community members' trust in our country's form of democracy as we're protecting this very precious resource, our common water. Strategically leveraging the limited resources shared amongst the federal, state, and local agencies can foster innovative protection programs that can effectively protect the environment and community health abundance and support the diverse and healthy economies for enhanced well-being for everyone. Our members have been proactive in their management of their water supply and their water quality responsibilities. Federal rules should not prevent or impair Idaho from continuing our active efforts to implement the Clean Water Act in ways that make sense to Idaho and its industries, and that are also based on the physical realities of our hydrological systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I've got Jeff, Brenda, then Eugene. Jeff, please.
Well, hello, my name is Jeff Fontaine, and I currently serve as the Executive Director of both the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority and also the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, and I'm pleased to be representing the Nevada Association of Counties at today's roundtable. I actually started my career in public service as an engineer with the Water Division at US EPA Region 9, and then later served as manager of Nevada's Safe Drinking Water Program, which was or is delegated under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. I want to thank US EPA and the US Army for conducting the workshops, and also the Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming Association of Counties for hosting. CNRWA is a regional government comprised of 9 member counties in rural Nevada concerned with protection of their water resources in the Central Hydrographic Region, which is also the largest of Nevada's 14 hydrographic regions. And HRBWA is also regional government with 5 rural member counties whose mission is to ensure the quality and availability of water supplies within the Humboldt River Basin for the mutual benefit of the residents and industries within and visitors to those counties. Both organizations represent diverse stakeholders, including agriculture, mining, municipal, industry, wildlife, and conservation interests. And both organizations formulate, present unified positions on water-related issues on their behalf. I'm here because of concerns over how WOTUS will affect our member counties and the constituents they represent. WOTUS has been a moving target and at times has really resulted in undue burden on underserved and economically stressed communities. I'm interested in discussing how we can bring certainty, consistency, and also responsiveness to the implementation of WOTUS. I'm also concerned about the potential for federal overreach as it relates to Nevada's water resources and land use decisions. For example, Nevada law declares that as the policy of the state of Nevada to manage conjunctively the appropriation, use, and administration of all waters of the state, regardless of the source of water. Conjunctive management is critically important in Nevada and other arid western states, and more so now as we address drought and other impacts of climate change in our counties. It's my belief one size fits all is not going to work in Nevada. There are certainly differences between Nevada and other states, and we urge EPA and the Army Corps to work with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, which does have primacy delegated to them under the authority of the Clean Water Act for various programs, and urge them to be included as a partner in developing and implementing WOTUS. I look forward to the discussion today and follow up on our comments from EPA and the Army Corps, and thank you very much.
Great. Jeff, thank you. I just want to let you know that I proactively shut off your video because you were chopping a little bit in the audio. So next time you want to speak, please flip your video back on again. And if it's not choppy, then we'll roll with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I've got Brenda next, and then Eugene, then John. Brenda, please.
Thank you, Rob, and good afternoon, and thank you to the Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho Association of Counties, and to EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to allow us to share thoughts on WOTUS. My name is Brenda Richards, and I serve as the director for the Idaho Rangeland Conservation Partnership. IRCP is a nonprofit, non-dues-based organization bringing together diverse rangeland stakeholders to support locally led collaboratives and assist in facilitating exchanges between those stakeholders in building partnerships and help develop and implement solutions on issues affecting rangelands and the communities that depend on them. Our membership includes landowners, private, state and federal agencies, elected officials, conservation, recreation, and other stakeholders. Healthy and productive rangelands are critical in the West and depend upon water to assure the economic, social, and ecological well-being of those local communities, businesses, and the hundreds of species that depend on them in the West. In addition to being the director of IRCP, I am also a rancher in Owyhee County. I have over 30 years of work experience on land use policy and 25 years working with locally led collaboratives. I have served as the president for the Public Lands Council and also as chairman of the Owyhee Initiative. I served on our local watershed advisory council for the Owyhee River on total maximum daily loads with the state of Idaho. And I bring this experience to this conversation. In addition, I served as 12 years as the Owyhee County Treasurer, and in that capacity, represented the Idaho Association of Counties as their public lands chair and on the Western Interstate region of counties. I also served our county commissioners in the capacity of natural resource advisory. There's not one of these roles that did not include water quality, or water conservation conversations at some point in time in their discussions, and the approach to the work was always collaborative. Collaborative, consistent solutions are the only way to address this issue. For the rangelands and agricultural communities in the West, water is not only vital to the economic well-being, but imperative for the wildlife and other activities these areas support. Because of this, many states, counties, cities, and rural communities have already taken the necessary measures to assure water quality and water conservation standards are at their highest level. Additional federal regulation seems to be unnecessary and often overreaching. State water laws are in place in Idaho and many of the other Western states, and more times than not, these water laws are more stringent than the federal regulations. Stakeholders at this level have day-to-day skin in the game to assure that irrigation, drinking, and water for livestock, wildlife, and other uses are at their highest quality and meeting the standards to assure consistency and long-term well-being, both ecologically and economically. Idaho, as well as many other Western states, has already taken a proactive, progressive approach by implementing groundwater management plans, runoff standards, best management practices for agriculture, water quality standards for TMDLs, and addressing other concerns around sediment loads and temperature. Because of these plans and measures, an expanded definition of WOTUS is disruptive and often unnecessary overreach of federal jurisdiction. Rules and definitions must make sense to the industries and communities in the state, and also to the hydrological systems and aquifers that are unique to that state. There must be a balance between state and federal regulations, and as states across the nation differ widely, states are best left to implement. The WOTUS rule also raises a question around enforcement. States are often set up to assure compliance, and it's questionable if the federal agencies will have the bandwidth or jurisdiction to enforce this compliance. Again, this should be left up to the states. New rules or definitions should not prevent a state from continuing their activities and efforts of implementing the Clean Water Act. The current definition seems to lack the necessary clarity and consistency that we need. It is much too broad in what it intends to encompass, and the proper balance of state and federal power must be maintained and assured. Our stakeholders must have regulatory certainty to know what rules apply. Again, thank you for the opportunity to participate, and I look forward to the comments and discussions.
Great, Brenda, thank you. I've got Eugene, John, and Colin. Eugene, please.
Thank you for hosting us today, and Sylvia and Elliot, I don't doubt your challenge of gathering all these comments and putting them into something usable is going to be an easy task. I don't envy you for the task you have ahead of you. I iterate a lot of the items that people have said today, but I represent the National Association of Home Builders, and I thank you for having some of my fellow members on some of the other roundtables in different regions of the country. As we all know, every region is a little unique, how we develop, how we use the land. I'm a land developer and home builder in Bozeman, Montana here, and we've had circumstances where rules are implemented differently, timeframes are uncertain. All of these items make it very hard and predictable on what we're trying to do. So regulatory certainty is paramount. We know what rules we're dealing with. I think right now it's very confusing as some of the definitions have reverted to past rules and the uncertainty of what the outcome of the SACA case will be. So having a reliable, repeatable process, we can encourage and educate our members to understand and move forward. And having an attitude of an expected outcome. It's really hard, and we do this in my industry all the time, where we make applications and we kind of just hope that we've made a case that everybody understands what we're trying to do and we're not trying to do anything harmful. So hopefully we can have a guideline to perform those in a consistent manner. And then the enforcement is consistent as well. It seems like we've heard stories all over the region of different kind of rule implementation and fines and whatnot. I think it's important that the states play a role. They're the ones on the ground here closely related to us. A lot of times they are staffed in person where we can have that relationship and have an understanding of each other. It's really hard when you don't know who you're working with and it's changing all the time. The significant nexus test led to a lot of inconsistencies depending on who was implementing that rule. And so we are not in support of expanding that or continuing that. Lastly, I think it's been stated, but if a new rule is announced and implemented before the current Supreme Court Sackett case is heard and understood, I fear that we're going to be going through this process again to reevaluate how we will all be needing to implement a new rule or define the new rule. So I hope we can use that as another guideline before we enforce another rule. So thanks, and appreciate you guys having us.
Yep, Eugene, thank you. Next is John, then Colin, then Rayleigh. John, please.
Hi, I'm John Berry, and I'm participating in this roundtable as a component of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association group and as a representative of developers. I'm with WWC Engineering in Sheridan, which is a multidisciplinary professional consulting firm specializing in a variety of services from civil engineering to environmental analysis. WWC's connection with WOTUS occurs primarily with providing clients with wetlands-related consulting and delineations associated with proposed developments. The question we seek to answer for our clients is, will a proposed project result in discharge of dredge or fill into the waters of the U.S., and thus our connection to WOTUS? I see WWC's role in the regulatory framework as mediators between regulatory agencies and individuals, companies, and municipalities. My main concern with defining WOTUS is keeping the definition as simple and as clear as possible so that project proponents understand the potential for encountering wetlands related to a proposed project and the implications of disturbing wetlands if present. The April 21st, 2020 Federal Register announcement of the definition of WOTUS was 93 pages in length. To me, this emphasizes the crux of the problem of maintaining simplicity in the definition and implementation of the WOTUS rule. It is my assertion that the EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers need to adopt a regional approach to defining WOTUS and get away from the one-size-fits-all approach. This will not be an easy process or one that is accomplished with speed. I encourage the agencies to step back from the process that has been started so that they can fully understand the importance of the position of a regional approach to managing waters of the U.S. and incorporating state involvement in the process. Thank you very much for considering our input in this matter.
John, thank you. I've got Colin, Rayleigh, and then Todd. Colin, please.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, again, thank you to Wyoming and Montana and Idaho for putting this together. My name is Colin McKee. I'm the Regulatory Affairs Director for the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Our organization represents the oil and gas industry in the state, including operators, producers, consultants, service companies, kind of the gamut of the whole industry, which is a very consequential, important industry for Wyoming. Sylvia and Elliot, I do appreciate you taking time. I can imagine that 10 roundtables is exhausting. I agree with you. I think you have saved the best for last. The Intermountain West, I think you're picking up on a theme with the things that we would like to see out of EPA and Army Corps with this regulation. I think the couple of things that I'll highlight right now are actually kind of responses to the questions that you had, Sylvia. One of the things that you said that EPA would like to do is to start working on things right now. And I think that gives probably most people on this roundtable a little bit of pause. As you've heard, there's been an incredible amount of change just with this definition. If you go through the past regulatory or definition changes and then the two that EPA has on the horizon, there will have been 6 different definitions of WOTUS in effect through the course of 8 years. And this is just one thing that industry and all of these other partners have to deal with. There's a myriad other federal, state, and local things that we have to balance. And so to have something like this that ping pongs back and forth so much is frustrating and difficult. And I think the primary reason, and it's the same thing everyone else has stated, why we think EPA and Army Corps should just slow down right now is in October, the Sackett case will be heard by the Supreme Court. Opinion will be out around this time next year. And I think everyone on this roundtable knows that there is going to be some change in scope to EPA's jurisdiction over waters. We don't know what it is, but it's going to change. So, we all have finite time, finite resources. It would be really great. I know it was listed in the unified agenda that EPA and Army Corps are intending to issue a final rule, final definition in August. I think everyone would appreciate not having to expend more resources right now and just hold tight so we can all focus on other things and get other things accomplished, until we actually know what the regulatory landscape should be. The other point I'd like to hit on again goes to, you had mentioned that it's an objective to eliminate inconsistent application, and that's awesome. That's why we all want to be on this roundtable, is to engage with federal agencies to find something that works clearly and consistently every time. And so when there's a new administration, we don't have to redo this rule, it just works. I think that it's my perception that the federal agencies see eliminating inconsistency by expanding the rule, by making it apply to places all over the US. And I don't think that's the way we see it, across the states out here on this call. It can, as was just mentioned, the formal rule or the preamble is almost 100 pages in the Federal Register, which we all know one page in the Federal Register does not equal one actual page of text. That's a huge preamble. So keeping things clear and concise, I think it would be our goal. And what I hope gives the federal agencies assurance that they don't need an expansive rule is that states like Wyoming regulate water quality across the state for everything. So if Wyoming doesn't have the exact same requirement as the Clean Water Act, they have something very similar, and there is the goal of no undue degradation to any water quality in any place in the state. So just because it's not all federally managed does not mean anything is left uncovered in Wyoming. So I hope that gives you all a level of assurance that we're doing things really well here. Appreciate you all putting this together, and look forward to the conversation.
Colin, thank you. I've got Rayleigh, Todd, then Paul. Rayleigh, please.
Great, thank you. I'm Rayleigh Honeycutt, and I serve as the Director of Natural Resources for the Montana Stock Growers Association. And it's my privilege today to represent Montana ranchers on this roundtable. Montana and all American cattlemen need an easy to understand WOTUS definition that allows for straightforward implementation. The Clean Water Act impacts all segments of the beef supply chain. Ranchers across the country send their cattle to graze or to pastures or rangeland with ephemeral stream beds and water their cattle using stock ponds. Animal feeding operations are frequently permitted under the Clean Water Act as point sources and integrate waste treatment systems to effectively manage manure. Since the settlement of the West, and particularly in Montana, ranchers have been responsible, environmentally conscientious land managers in partnership with our state, and we continually work to improve that relationship with the environment. Many Montana cattle producers are multi-generational, and these families have dealt with every iteration of the Clean Water Act jurisdiction since its passage in 1972. And now, nearly 50 years of this jurisdictional tug-of-war, regulated stakeholders want nothing more than a consistent act to apply. Ranchers rely on clean water for their operations and are often on the front lines of maintaining and improving water quality to sustain and conserve the environment. Irrigation plays a critical role in ranching in Montana, whether it's for growing forages or crops. And EPA's proposed rule could change the agency's jurisdiction when it comes to regulating both the land and water Montana ranchers depend on for a living. In fact, agriculture is our state's largest industry. Over 93 million acres of rugged mountains, deep valleys, and wide open plains are affected in Montana by this rule. And roughly 60 million of those acres are in farm and ranch production. Overbearing, unclear, and inconsistent policies will have a crippling effect on Montana family ranches, businesses, and our state's economy. As an organization that represents ranchers who have cared for the land for many generations, we believe ranchers do an exceptional job in conserving and sustaining the water in our state. Additionally, Montana's laws regarding water quality and quantity are strong. We have very clear laws regarding the state's jurisdiction on water, and the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation and the Department of Environmental Quality regulates our water and for our state. Many ranchers also engage in voluntary efforts, whether on their own, in partnership with our state, or with the help of agencies like NRCS to conserve water quantity and protect water quality on ranches and leases across the state. In the final rule, cattle producers need particularly practical and interpretable WOTUS definitions to provide certainty and clarity for their businesses. Thank you.
Really, thank you. I've got Todd, then Paul. Todd, you're up.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who's put this roundtable together. My name is Todd Fornstrom. I am from Pine Bluff, Wyoming. I serve as the Wyoming Farm Bureau president. We represent farms and ranchers from all over the state of Wyoming. Every crop, every different form of livestock grown in the state. The majority of our members are what you'd call family farmers or family farmers. It sounds weird coming out of my mouth. My background is from irrigated farming and feedlot operations. So I've dealt with the local regulators, and I've have not had a taste of dealing with the federal regulators. Top line issues coming from agriculture. We need to be able to walk out on our front porch and be able to tell what is a water of the United States. We don't have the excess money to hire consultants, attorneys to tell us that our ditch is actually a ditch and not a river. It needs to be clear, and you've heard that throughout all of the people in this roundtable. And the last highline issue I would let you know is, instead of expanding the rule, maybe EPA should look into becoming more of a resource for the states. Our states are doing a good job. In the 50 years of the waters of the United States, our states have taken good care of all non-navigable water, and they should be allowed to keep doing that. And thank you.
Todd, thank you. Paul, you're up.
Thank you very much. And Paul Arrington, I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel for the Idaho Water Users Association. I echo the appreciation to the agencies, to the Idaho, Wyoming, Montana counties, organizations for helping to facilitate this roundtable. The Idaho Water Users Association is an organization of canal companies, irrigation districts, groundwater districts, and supporting industries. Basically, our responsibility is to get the water from the rivers to the fields. I've really appreciated that being the last person here on most of my highline topics. In fact, had them all written down, and I just changed some thoughts here in the last few moments. I appreciate living in the Intermountain West. Maybe it's the fact that our roots are in the mountains or on the ranges or in the fields, but when we have tough problems in our states, we roll up our sleeves, we work together, and we find solutions. And you've heard, I think, 4 top line issues consistently weaving through every presentation or every discussion today, whether it be from conservation groups, from states, from mining, farming, etc. One, sack it. Why are we in a rush to have a new rule when we all expect and anticipate that something is going to be at a minimum tweaked when it comes out, when a decision comes from the Supreme Court in the Sackett decision? Two, we need to zealously guard and maintain the state's authorities over its water rights and over water, the state's jurisdiction over water quality. Three, we need clarity and simplicity in a new rule. It's been said many, many times, 93 pages of a preamble. It's not clear. It's not consistent. It's not simple. And then finally, number four, we need certainty. Whether it's a yo-yo game or ping pong or zigzag or whatever, we're all struggling with the same thing. With 6 different interpretations over 8 years, it's impossible for the regulated industries to understand from one project to the next what their obligations are going to be. And so with that, those are my comments. Thank you for the time. And again, thank you for organizing this event.
Great. Paul, thank you. Okay, so we're going to pivot right into our first discussion block. I'm going to share the screen here for just a moment so folks are able to see the discussion questions. And then once we start our speakers, I'm going to stop the screen sharing. So for the folks that are on the live stream, please make note of the questions we're going to be discussing here in discussion one block here at the outset, so that that provides a context for you to understand the comments that you're hearing. So the way we're going to run the discussion blocks is the following way. So working with Eric, Micah, and Jeremiah, they've identified 4 speakers to start off the conversation for us. And so I'm going to start off with those 4 speakers, and then I'm going to ask additional speakers to jump in into the queue by raising their hand. And if you're in the room in Idaho, I know I'm going to receive a chat that's going to indicate that there's someone in the room that has indicated an interest to jump into that queue. The way we're going to manage the time is after the first 4 speakers go, I'm going to see how much time we have left in discussion block, and then I'll let you know verbally how long I'm asking your comments to be so that we're able to accommodate the full range of folks that are in the queue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the screen so folks are able to see the question. My order for discussion block 1, I've got Paul. And so Paul, you got to go last, and now you get to go first. I've got Amanda, Jeff, then Micah, and then I'm going to be asking folks to raise their hand. So the questions that we're asking folks to reflect on are up there on the screen, and then I'm going to put them into the chat so folks are able to refer back to them. So discussion block 1 are on regional specific water features. I'm going to come to Paul, Amanda, Jeff, then Micah, and then I'm asking folks to raise their hand to jump into the queue after that. So Paul, take it away again.
Thank you very much. Again, appreciate this conversation. When the folks I represent talk about Clean Water Act and Clean Water Act jurisdiction, we primarily jump straight to ditches. And what is a ditch, and what is a jurisdictional ditch, and what is not? We need a crystal clear exclusion from the Clean Water Act jurisdiction for irrigation infrastructure. Classifying irrigation and drainage infrastructure as WOTUS would cripple the West's food and fiber industries, as farmers would be subject to incredible bureaucratic red tape. Without clear exemptions for these irrigation features, we will see critics of irrigated agriculture claim that they are subject to Clean Water Act jurisdiction, spawning years of lengthy and costly litigation. In July of 2020, the agencies issued a guidance memo addressing Section 404F exemptions for the construction and maintenance of ditches and the maintenance of drains. That memo should be kept in place, regardless of any future WOTUS rules. These exemptions provide important assurances that irrigated agriculture can continue to function without the need for a Clean Water Act permit to work on the critical man-made features. If, however, the agencies rescind that ditch memo, they should reinstate and use the July 2007 Army Corps Regulatory Guidance Letter 07-02. Prior WOTUS rules, and in particular the 2015 rule, failed to clearly articulate exempt ditches and left the discussion to subjective interpretations. This injected uncertainty for Western ag. On the other hand, the 2020 rule provided clarity and certainty by outlining 6 categories of ditches that are WOTUS and 11 categories that are not. It provided one of the clearest regulatory roadmaps yet regarding WOTUS and ditches, and any new rule should be similarly clear. One of the other questions is how our state's regulating. We've worked hard with our state. Our state does monitor and does regulate in Idaho water quality, but we have worked hard with them to maintain the exemptions for things like ditches, irrigation ditches, and agricultural return flows. Water users throughout the state, I mentioned this in my opening comments, are very proactive in implementing agricultural BMPs, which include sediment ponds and other things to help reduce sediment flows to the river. Idaho is a desert climate. Many of the states, all of the states here have desert climates in them. The need for ditches in order to have a thriving agricultural economy is paramount in these states. And so having clarity and maintaining those exceptions is important for ditches. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Paul, Paul, thank you. I've got Amanda, Jeff, and Micah. Amanda, you are up.
Great, thank you. So the Montana water resources that are most implicated by the EPA and Army Corps' jurisdictional confusion are wetlands, particularly wetlands that are not adjacent to other sources, ditches, potholes, and ephemeral and intermittent sources. Ditches are crucial given the arid nature of the state and allow Montana to maintain arable lands. Potholes are extremely important in Montana as well, providing water for stock and wildlife year-round when other ephemeral or intermittent sources are unavailable. And damming and reserving ephemeral and intermittent sources are critical to preserve consistent and continued water sources throughout the driest parts of the year. We have 3 agencies within the state that have key roles when it comes to managing water in Montana. Our Department of Environmental Quality handles water quality. My department, the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, handles water quantity. And then the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks oversees the maintenance of water for fish, wildlife, and recreation purposes. For the most part, our 3 agencies and their regulatory purview are separate. However, on water-related issues that span the 3 agencies, such as drought, gauging, measurement, et cetera, the agencies work together in a collaborative fashion. What we often see is a single project in the state may need permits from DEQ, DNRC, FWP, Army Corps, the county, and the Conservation District, just as an example. And all of these entities may have some overlap, but do different things. Montana agencies are able to coordinate and collaborate to ensure similar messaging. When state and federal agencies agree on an effort, they coordinate well. If there are differences between the two, however, that daylight is exploited to the detriment of applicants and processes. So to that end, the state has the efficiency and I can speak to the state of Montana specifically. Across our state agencies, we coordinate immensely well, and we really do work in a collaborative fashion to get to an end result. But when you insert federal agencies, as I stated, things often get more complicated quite quickly. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you. I've got Jeff, then Micah, and I don't have anyone who has their hand up or indicated that they want to jump in the queue. So please go ahead and do that. So I have a sense of who wants to share their perspective here on this discussion block. Jeff, you're up, and then Micah, you're up next. Jeff.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my video off for the time being since it was lagging last time. So Nevada is the most arid state in the nation, and like the other states that are participating in this roundtable, it's also geographically diverse and has hydrological extremes. Should also mention that 86% of the land in Nevada is managed as public lands, primarily by the Bureau of Land Management. And although most of the waters of the U.S. in Nevada are on public lands, they are managed by the state of Nevada. So the Central Hydrographic Region, which is an area that I work in, it really lacks the regional surface water flows, and but it does contain numerous ephemeral and intermittent streams, springs, and playas. And if you look at a a detailed topographic map of Nevada, what you'll see is thousands of dashed squiggly blue lines, which represent intermittent water as well as other areas that are depicted as land subject to inundation on those maps. So it's really unclear how these waters would be evaluated and regulated. So we support an exemption for non-relatively permanent waters, including waters with ephemeral and intermittent flow regimes, and or delegation of those decisions to the states. As far as the Humboldt River Basin is concerned, that's also unique. It has a drainage area of over 7,400 square miles. It's over 330 miles in length. It is the largest river basin that is entirely within the state of Nevada. And even though the Humboldt has no outlet and terminates at the Humboldt Sink, it's classified as a water of the U.S. So one of the fundamental principles of integrated water resource management is the interconnected nature of water in the hydrological cycle, including the interaction between surface water and groundwater. And so this does create some concern for us about what waters will be jurisdictional, considering terms such as significant nexus, adjacent, and significantly affect. As far as Nevada's water resources and uses, there are many, including irrigation, public supply, mining, power, domestic, industrial, livestock, and aquaculture. And they are managed by the state water engineer, while water quality is regulated by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection under their delegated authority from the US EPA. You've heard this before, and I'm going to say it again. From other states, Nevada's statutory definitions of waters of the state, which has been in place since 1973, effectively addresses water quality matters in a comprehensive manner. The state has authority to protect all waters, whether or not they are subject to the Clean Water Act, and includes all waters situated wholly or partly within or bordering upon the state. And NDEP has carried out this authority effectively and efficiently for many decades. So that concludes my remarks.
Great, Jeff, thank you. So I've got, here's my order. I've got Micah next, and then I know Bevan and Joanna in the room want to provide some perspectives. And I don't have anyone who is on the Zoom that has raised their hand. So my order right now are Micah, Bevan, then Joanna. Micah?
Thank you. Again, Micah Christensen. Just going to give you some unique water resources in Wyoming. Wyoming straddles the continental divide, and as a result provides headwaters for 4 major river basins in the western United States. These major river basins are the Missouri, Mississippi, the Green, Colorado, Snake, Columbia, and the Great Salt Lake. This may sound like we have an abundance of water, but in reality, we have a quite arid climate. My wife is from Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. And if we decided to have a water license plate, we might be able to say something like Wyoming, the land of 14 reservoirs. But we certainly don't have the water as you see in the eastern United States. As a brief aside, I did learn prior to everyone hopping on the Zoom meeting that one of the facilitators has not yet set foot in the West. And of course, the Roundtable sends you our greatest sympathies. But on a serious note, we need our federal regulators to see and understand our climate, our water resources, and build stronger relationships with our regulatory agencies, especially those that have primacy, like Wyoming. And obviously, from Wyoming, we'd invite you to our state, meet our folks, and see our climate. If you're going to be in Denver, Colorado for NACO, the exciting Mile High City, go ahead and travel further uphill and make it to Wyoming. Stop by our Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. I'm sure they'd love to continue these conversations. Back to Wyoming's unique surface water. About 70% of our surface water comes in the form of snow. Consequently, 80% of Wyoming's streams or stream miles are either intermittent or ephemeral. Put another way, there's more than one squiggly line on the map that could be named Dry Creek in Wyoming. These creeks simply just don't flow. Another unique feature of Wyoming's water resources is produced water discharges from our oil and gas industry. There are numerous areas around our state where decades of produced water has created oases in the desert, providing water for wildlife, fauna, and livestock. Wyoming has primacy. Wyoming works very hard, and I'll give a nod to our Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality with managing the state's water. As another member of the Wyoming delegation stated, we do need clarity in WOTUS, but it's not so that Wyoming can regulate its water. It's so that as a state, we aren't hamstrung in the regulation of our water. Wyoming supports collaborative local, state, and federal partnerships to develop regional tools for use in the definition of WOTUS, to recognize regional differences, in hydrology and connectivity with other waters of the US. This embodies the spirit of cooperative federalism, and we appreciate, again, EPA and the Army Corps being here today.
Great, Micah, thank you. I've got Bevan and Joanna, and then I don't have anyone else in the queue, so if you're interested in jumping into that queue, let me know. Bevan, you're up.
Rob, thank you. So Jeff Fontaine did a great job of giving you the technical information on Nevada and kind of a little bit. So I'm the dumb farmer in the group, so I'm going to give you the farmer's perspective. I come from Lincoln County, Nevada. Lincoln County is 10,000 plus square miles. We have about 5,000 people. We have everything from Mojave Desert at about 1,800 feet in elevation to Alpine at 9,800 feet in elevation. Half of the county is in the Great Basin. The other half is in the Colorado River drainage. There is no water that leaves Lincoln County to the Colorado River, except maybe about once every, I don't know, 40 or 50 years when we get those fun flood events. But other than that, we have 2 streams. Now, I'll challenge anybody to roll their canoe up those streams when they come to visit, but bring it with you and you have a look and see. And they'll dry up before they hit the end of the county. My point, I guess, is that that's one county in Nevada. There's 16 others. They have connections. Almost every county has a connection along the border, except for 3 or 4, but connections to California, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Arizona. Did I miss any? And all of those have differing aspects in their water relationships. Nevada's water law is very strong, always has been. And our environmental protection laws for water are very strong. And we take care of those waters. As Jeff mentioned, those waters end up, most of them, in dry lakes. So from a personal perspective, I tried to start a project 4 years ago on the edge of a dry lake in central Nevada. Part of that project required just a deference from the Corps of Engineers to say that no, it's not on waters of the U.S. qualified land. 2 years later, after the formal request was sent and monthly requests were sent for response, we finally did receive a response. It took 2 years to say, no, it doesn't qualify. In a place as large and diverse as the state of Nevada, it is, in my mind, simple mind, impossible to write one set of rules that's going to cover every instance and every aspect and administer it from an elite bubble in Washington, D.C. I'm sorry, I can't make it work in my head. We have state and local government that has authorities and has opportunities, and that government closest to the ground that knows the situation is able to make the decisions and provide the certainty that our citizens need. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, Evan, thank you. I've got Joanna next, and then as I mentioned before, I don't have anyone else in the queue, so if you're interested in jumping in and reflecting here on the question for discussion block 1, send me a signal. Joanna, you're up.
Thank you, and I appreciate being able to jump onto this particular block. So I'm going to focus just briefly on the stormwater permitted under the Clean Water Act facilities, and the reality here in Idaho, where even though we have also great climatic change and variability in terms of our precipitation and water resources between our northern parts of our state and our southern part of our state, where our southern part of our state definitely is very reflective of the Wyoming situation as well. But throughout our state, regardless of where it's located. We have stormwater facilities that both are in upland and that are dry and that are engineered and designed to comply with the Federal Clean Water Act water quality requirements. We also have conveyances through the foothills, through our cities, through our towns that tap into both groundwater and some surface water formerly that were streams and that are now piped and that are being brought down into the larger water bodies. These have been classified as municipal separate storm sewer systems. They have also been classified under many of the definitions that have been suggested and finalized, and now under review once more, as waters of the United States. And so in these situations, we have goals for protecting downstream waters. And then we also have goals of protecting the WOTUS goals within these engineered conveyances that are seeking, according to if they're identified as the waters of the US, and if their physical constraints are not taken into account, the goals of the act of fishable and swimmable are then applied. We request that there be some examination regarding exemptions, regarding those facilities that are already being governed under an NPDES permit, regarding the relationship of those facilities to the definitions of the waters of the US. Thank you.
Great, Joanna, thank you. So we've got 3 folks in the queue, so that's perfect. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left here. So I've got Terry, then I've got Colin, then I've got Todd. Terry, you're up.
Thanks, Rob. Just a couple things, and they've already been touched on already. Mike brought it up on produced water discharges in Wyoming. Those have been in existence for decades in many places in the state. And I just want to stress the importance of it from a county commissioner standpoint for our constituents. When an oil and gas company is able to discharge those waters, and granted, it's got to be certain waters that are able to go downstream. They are tested on a periodic basis. But by them being able to do that is extremely important. One, it lowers their lifting costs. The waters that go downstream, farmers use that to irrigate with, ranchers use that for their livestock, and wildlife uses it. So it ties in from there to recreation. It's just the economic stability and viability for being able to have those produced water discharges is important. And looking at it, if those are become hindered in any way, that definitely affects our constituents on how they're able to conduct their operations. Paul touched on the ditches. In our state, we have extensive canal systems for irrigation from the dams that we have, and then the numerous canals. I have one right on my place that I drive across the bridge every day that's been in existence. In fact, right where I live was where the first attempt to divert water out of the Bighorn River was back in 1886, I believe, was done. So that it goes back a long time, and the importance of those ditches and canal systems to sustain our agriculture is extremely important. So we appreciate you guys listening to us, and it was touched on about when you're dealing with state and local entities, the importance of dealing with us at the local level is really helpful. One, our constituents can see that that we can do things at the local level, not just be trampled on from the top down, and it's very important to have that collaboration and cooperation. Thank you.
Terry, thank you. I've got Colin, and then after Colin, I've got Todd. Colin, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to make a quick point. And if you look at the Wyoming Water Quality Division's rules and regulations, in Chapter 1, they define what waters of the state are, and that is all surface and groundwater, including waters associated with wetlands within Wyoming. And as mentioned before, no activities can occur on any of these waters without being, permitted through the Wyoming DEQ first. So it's just wanted to make a quick point that Wyoming's rules are in fact much broader than the federal agencies, and we are covering our water quality commitments in the state.
Great, Colin, thank you. Todd, I see that you put your hand down. I don't know if you're still interested in providing some perspective on this. If you are, you're up.
I've just kind of maybe more trivial than anything, but without the irrigation systems in Wyoming from the turn of the century, it's like Colin just pointed out is we in Wyoming may have no wetlands. There are very few rivers that would run year round, if any would run year round. So Wyoming takes good care of their water, and they should probably be allowed to.
Todd, thank you. Okay, so we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left of our allotted time on discussion block, excuse me, on discussion block 1. And so I don't have anyone else in the queue, so I'm going to make a last call here for discussion block number 1. And if not, I'm going to move to discussion block number 2. Anyone else have an interest in providing any perspective on that discussion block and discussion questions under this block? Okay, great. Let's move to discussion block number 2, and we're going to do you guys did awesome. That's exactly how I want to run the second discussion block. I'm going to leave it up there on the screen like I did before for the first perspective, and so that's for the benefit of the folks that are in the live stream. I will then copy and paste the question into the chat so folks have the ability to refer to that. As we did before, we've got 4 individuals that we were identified as the first 4 speakers. I've got Rayleigh, Eugene, Colin, and Jeff. And then after we get to those 4 speakers, I want to be looking for folks to raise their hand to jump into the conversation. Rayleigh, it's over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, I will start by sharing that the NWPR contained exclusions that were vital to ranchers and farmers around the country. Members of the Montana stock growers generally supported NWPR because it rightfully excluded ephemeral features and isolated water bodies from federal jurisdiction, while providing exclusion for agricultural specific features, including prior converted cropland and stock ponds. As a headwater state, Montana has significant presence of ephemeral rivers and streams that only flow in the spring during snowmelt or after significant weather events. And this is why it is imperative that these features remain as exclusions. Additionally, the prior converted cropland exclusion goes a long way to provide agricultural producers with much needed certainty. Cattle producers were also very happy to see the continued exemption of stock ponds. Stock ponds are vital to ensure that our cattle have adequate water access. However, the NWPR list of features not considered WOTUS created substantial confusion through the rulemaking process. We are also now concerned with the renewed interest in the establishment of federal jurisdiction over ditches. You've heard from many speakers already mentioned this, but ditches play a critical role in our water system here in Montana as well. Specifically, irrigation districts provide ranches with constant water supply following precipitation events to parts of our state during the driest times of the year. Most ditches have not historically been regulated as WOTUS, and they need to continue to be exempted. Any categorical regulation of ditches is an expansion that impinges on the traditional state and local authority over water and land use. As I mentioned in my opening comments, this continual ping pong of definition changes is causing significant effects for ranching operations. As the process moves forward, we would caution against the creation of new burdens or jurisdictional expansions that cut against the language or spirit of existing precedent. You've heard from many people today as well that until the Supreme Court decision is made, we ask that this process be paused. Ranchers need continued effort for clear lists of exclusions. We cannot get those if court decisions are pending. We are very concerned that WOTUS rules have significantly expanded EPA and the Corps' control beyond legal limits. I'll pass it off to my other folks to add on to that. Thank you.
Really, thank you. I've got Eugene, Colin, then Brenda. Eugene, you're up.
Thank you. In my realm of implementing this Waters of the U.S. Regulation, I've had experience with it reducing our ability to produce affordable lots, exacerbating the current housing shortage in the area. Housing affordability is always at the forefront of all of our decision making and our thought process in regulatory and government affairs discussions we have. Increasing regulatory costs reduces housing affordability. And I'll give you an example. We had one project we were working on. Local jurisdiction actually came to us and said, if you guys pull this part of your application, because the delays it could take for you getting the permit, we will submit the permit. And they did, and they had the approved permit within about 3 months, where it would have taken us over 2 years. So the inconsistency there, trying to stay ahead of the need in housing and affordability is really a challenge, certainly in these circumstances that we're facing today. And just understanding the consistent process will help our members, help our citizens move forward and live within the rules. Thank you.
Eugene, thank you. I've got Colin and then Brenda, and then I'm looking for folks to jump into the conversation by raising their hand and letting us know. Colin, you're up.
All right, thank you, Rob. So for this question, part one, how do communities interact with WOTUS? I would probably largely say with confusion. I think unless you're doing activities a lot that interact with state or federal waters, you don't know anything about WOTUS. And as Micah had mentioned earlier, 80% of the stream miles in Wyoming are either intermittent or ephemeral. And so, again, with this ever-changing federal landscape, and activity that a farmer or rancher or anybody may have done in 2013 was treated different in 2015 and different in 2020, and so on and so on. And I think Wyoming may have the premier example of this, which I'm sure folks remember the story of Andy Johnson. You had a guy who put in a pond in his house and almost got fined $35,000 a day because he was so we have a premier example of the repercussions of not knowing the appropriate process to go through. The other part of this, so what's our experience been with the couple past rules? Well, there was an injunction on the clean water rule that covered Wyoming, so we never had to implement that. And then, quite honestly, the navigable waters rule was in effect for so little time. I think everyone supported it, but it was only around for a year, so it probably didn't have enough time to sink in to see what we really thought. But I do know that our industry supported it. A couple of examples of what to show you how the state or how operators reacted to that navigable waters rule. So as was mentioned, it diminished the federal reach on what waters were jurisdictional, and that included some wetlands. But as I've noted, the state has a statutory responsibility to protect all waters. And so our Wyoming DEQ acted quickly to put rules in place that would cover wetlands that were no longer subject to federal jurisdiction, to ensure that any activities occurring in those now state wetlands were done appropriately. So that shows you the responsiveness and the care that the state takes with its water. Another aspect to just show the federal versus state relation or requirements. One thing that our operators are required to do if they are interacting with a federal water is to develop a spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plan. And we have absolutely no problem doing that. We're happy to do it. We want to be proactive and think through, if something happens, what are the steps that we need to take to remediate it and get everyone online to take care of an issue. But in the absence of, in an interaction with state water, there are, like I said before, very similar requirements. It's not, an SPCC plan, but the state has protocols that if a spill occurs, an operator has requirements to mitigate and immediately start contacting the appropriate local, state, federal, whoever's appropriate for the spill to take care of it. So those would be my couple of comments on that question.
Great, Colin, I appreciate it. So next in the queue is Brenda, and then I don't have anyone else in the queue, and we've got a good solid 20 minutes left here for this discussion topic, so we can accommodate many more commenters here. And so I got Brenda, and I see that Terry is up after Brenda. So Brenda, you are up.
Okay, thank you. This question that asks about how do people in your communities encounter the effects of the waters of the United States, I think is imperative to the whole conversation theme that we're hearing here in all the presenters. And that goes down to, it needs to be consistent, it has to have clarity, and it also needs to have local collaboration. Bevan mentioned the number of counties in Nevada. I think it was 14. Anyway, Idaho has 44 counties. And what's really unique, I live in the southern corner where it's high desert, as much as southern Idaho is. But you go clear up to the Panhandle, where we're right along the Canadian border, and Idaho has all the diversity in between. The thing every one of those counties have in common is we all are dependent on water. In Idaho, ag and the natural resource aspect is, if not the top, the second largest industry in the state. And as such, it's imperative that we have local input, and the state has some jurisdiction on this. We know what's best there, and those conversations need to happen locally. I'm very proud for Idaho because Paul indicated in his comments, we are very proactive in what we've done in our agriculture, in even our wildlife, and in our conservation practices. We have a tradition here of bringing all entities and stakeholders together to talk about these issues and get to the local solutions. And that is where you're going to have success. We do obviously need input from the EPA and the Army Corps. We need those guidelines, but the best solutions always come down to the collaborative local solutions for those areas that work best, because one size does not fit all in any state, but especially in the West. Rayleigh also talked about the aspect in Montana of the ephemeral streams. Idaho is the same. We have the ephemeral streams, stock ponds, and dirt tanks. For our ranching communities, not only does that provide water at times for our grazing systems on state, federal, and private land, but the wildlife in our state use them. And so they're very important. Again, we have had conversations locally and on state levels about those aspects, and we just feel that definition needs to be clear and not overbroad in what it's talking about. Communities have to have this certainty and this input for their success and for the economic stability. And again, this is also important to the nation as a whole, because as we've seen with all of the travel that people have been doing post-COVID, people come out here to see the West for what it is. And the locally led aspects and the places, the states that have skin in the game day to day, know what's going to work. They have an interest for their recreation, for their drinking water, for their economic viability, in making sure that those waters are conserved and are clean and are meeting the standards. And so I thank you for the opportunity to talk about that, and really would like to reiterate that the states are doing their job, because we are the ones that live here and have skin in the game day to day.
Great. Brenda, thank you. So my order is Terry's next, and then following Terry, John, I'm going to come to you, and then Todd. And so Terry, I hope I bought you enough time to get up to the podium.
Perfect, thanks, Rob. Okay, this is in regards to the question, how can agencies interact better with regional, state, and local interests on WOTUS now and in the future? So what I want to do is just give you a little example of the town I live in, which is, again, I said earlier, Warren, Wyoming, up in the north central part of the state. And to give you some background, The Bighorn River flows through Worland right on the west side of town. And back in the 70s, in times of low water on the Bighorn River, a tree got stuck in the middle of the river right by one of the main river bridges that goes through town. And over time, we've got 2 tributaries that come into the Bighorn River that only run in spring runoff and have big thunderstorms, things like that. And it brings a lot of sediment in. So over time, the sediment built up downstream of this tree and turned into an island that was about 1.7 acres in size, 5 feet deep. And when we estimated it was going to be about 1,700 truckloads that it was going to take to get that out of there. Well, the reason I bring that up is in 2014, we had an ice jam, and that island right in the middle of the river diverted the ice into the west side of town in Worland and caused some flooding. And we looked at pursuing a Section 205 permit in 2015, but we backed off after inquiries and covered the difficult and expensive bureaucratic hurdles and the potential of more stringent and expensive environmental permits to remove the sediment island. Fast forward to 2017, the same thing happened again. And in that 3 years, the island got a little bit bigger from what it had been before. And this time the flooding was more extensive. That was in February of 2017. And the whole town came out to help to sandbag. The Army National Guard was there. And finally the broke and the flooding receded. Senator Barrasso for Wyoming had called and wondered if I would come out and testify in the Environment and Public Works Committee that he was chairing at the time. And the topic was ice jam mitigation. But it was interesting how we tried to remove this island before that had built up and had no success at all. And then when I get out to DC and testify, and I have the head of the Corps of Engineers sitting right beside me, October of 2017, we were able to remove that island and have it out and just like that. And the main topic again was ice jam mitigation, and that goes into such bigger issues where we have the sediment stuff where reservoirs out in the Badlands are washed out or silted in. So it's a whole bigger thing and cost that would take to fix that. But we looked at that and it was like, well, right there was a local issue that we tried to do something about it and couldn't make any headway and had to have the results of another flood to make some progress on it. So I bring that up just for a specific example and how long it took to do something and how long I was able to get it remedied after it came to a head. Thank you.
Great, Terry, thank you. I've got John, and then I've got Todd, and then I don't have anyone else in the queue. So if you want to jump in, please do so by raising your hand. John, you're up.
Okay, the clients we interact with at WWC mainly encounter WOTUS through wetlands delineations and impacts assessment related to project development. An often repeated statement from clients when encountering a WOTUS issue is, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit, is what the heck? These clients need a clear and concise definition of WOTUS to facilitate project planning and completion in a timely manner and without undue restrictions and higher costs of the project. The developers need to know that waters of the U.S. rules are based on sound science, but with an eye on precedents set by earlier rules and regulations. Having a clear definition of waters of the U.S. would remove much of the uncertainty in determining impacts of the waters of the U.S. and therefore ensuring the greatest protection to these waters, which is what this is all about. I would venture to say that most developers are more than willing to accept the regulations of WOTUS if determinations are based on consistent, clear, and defensible regulations. Thank you.
John, thank you. Todd, you are up. Todd?
In terms of WOTUS affecting our local communities, unfortunately, our local communities usually probably don't know that they're being affected by WOTUS, whether it be investors that are being stifled because of the ping pong of the rules, or just the actual cost of the regulation in goods, availability of housing, or even in food costs. All of this has an effect. Just unfortunately, the average public doesn't know about it. So That's all I had.
Todd, thank you. So we've got about, we had allocated up to 10 more minutes of time here. I see that Jeff's hand is up and we probably have time for 2 or 3 more folks. So if you've got some thoughts that you want to share on this topic, now's your chance. Jeff, and then we'll see where if there are other folks that want to jump in. Jeff, please.
Yes, thanks. I just want to jump on to the previous commenters' remarks regarding people not necessarily even knowing how WOTUS affects their projects, but delays and costs associated with WOTUS, the implementation of WOTUS, are very often occurred by counties and cities that are constructing or, as you've heard, maintaining a community's infrastructure. And so ultimately, they do affect the community and are, mostly paid for by the residents of that community. So again, it's sort of an effect that most people in a community may not necessarily realize is taking place.
Jeff, thank you. Next, I'm coming to Paul. Paul, you are up when you get to the podium.
Thank you. Just briefly, in regards to the specific part of the question relating to how do you encounter the effects of the significant nexus analysis. When you're looking at Clean Water Act, there are some things that are very clearly fall within the waters of the US, and there's things that very clearly do not. And all of this debate over rules is about how do you weed through and identify those things in the middle. The significant nexus analysis leaves too much to subjectivity. And so you find yourself from one regulator to the next dealing with different thoughts and views. We have a situation here where it's not with either of these agencies, but a different one involving maintenance of ditches in certain lowland areas. And we find that we're being forced to implement certain rules and certain criteria where other areas of the country are not, and in fact have chosen exactly the opposite tact that we're being forced to implement here. And so to the extent that the subjectivity and the gray matter, so to speak, of a significant nexus analysis and determining that middle area can be removed, you've heard it time and time again, simplicity and clarity is key. Thank you.
Great. Paul, thank you. Okay, so this is my last call here on discussion block number 2. Discussion block number 2. We've got about 8 more minutes, according to my watch, of the initially allocated time, but if not, we can borrow that time and move it on to discussion block 3. Anybody else interested in reflecting on discussion block 2? Okay. I'm not seeing anybody, so we're going to do the same thing again we just did here for discussion block number 2. For discussion block number 3, I'm going to share my screen, and that is going to have the questions that we're asking folks to reflect on. And so again, for the folks that are on the live stream, you want to make note of these because the subsequent conversation is going to be a reflection of these questions. I've got 5 folks that I know are initial folks that are scheduled to provide insight into this. I've got Joanna, Terry, Amanda, Brenda, and Jeff. After Joanna goes, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can maximize the view of the video. And then for the folks that are on the Zoom meeting, I'm going to put the discussion questions into the chat. So Joanna, I ask that you take it away.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to weigh in a little bit more regarding how our members look at these issues and in relationship to the resources here in Idaho and what also we are perceiving with respect to resources at the state and federal level as well. And I guess the bottom line is that we need to strategically leverage the limited resources that we do share amongst the different levels of government. We do need to foster innovative protection programs that can effectively protect environmental community health and support the diverse economies and healthy economies that the stakeholders here are representing. In relationship to WOTUS, it's important for the federal agencies to keep their own limited resources in mind, along with an understanding of the state's resources, and in this case, Idaho's resources, including the past and current efforts with respect to water, which is really a vital resource for all of us. We've had, of course, local, at the local government, we need to know what is occurring within our water bodies and take steps to protect our citizens and our water bodies. Here in Idaho, we have been very proactive in the management of our water supply and our water quality requirements as well. And the federal rules, again, let's reiterate it, we really are seeking for them to not prevent or impair Idaho from continuing these active efforts to implement the Clean Water Act in ways that are common sense, that leverage local resources effectively, and where it makes sense physically and economically to our industries and our hydrological systems. I'm just going to go through a list of a few examples of what Idaho has done over the years for being such a small state. I'm going to blow our horn just a little bit. We pioneered the use of macroinvertebrates for water quality beneficial use analysis and determinations, predating and informing similar efforts by the EPA. We developed the first water quality trading framework in the nation for the lower Boise River, predating and informing, again, EPA's own guidance. We've established statewide coverage of stakeholder-led basin advisory groups engaged with effective coordination of Clean Water Act funding and programs. We've developed statewide guidance for low-impact development and green infrastructure, drainage designs, as early as the 1990s, facilitating a significant on-site management of urban and industrial stormwater throughout our state. We also maintain an advantage group that's composed of USDA Rural Development, Army Corps of Engineers, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, Idaho Federal Delegation staff, Idaho Rural Water Association, ourselves, the Idaho Association of Idaho Cities, and recently joined with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, so that the state, federal, and local financial resources available for Idaho are effectively coordinated and leveraged on behalf of the most economically disadvantaged communities here in Idaho. 85% of our membership is our communities under 5,000. So of the 199 cities that are incorporated within the state of Idaho, 85% are under 5,000 people. We're a small state. The other thing that I recommend and appreciate being able to share my thoughts on relates to, in terms of things, I heard, the question, what can the EPA do now? And one of the things that I think would be a very helpful thing is for the EPA to identify and respect the state's water quantity issues at this point in time, and what plans are they making for their future? I think that those kinds of elements are important information for the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers staff engaged in these WOTUS discussions. The other thing that I recommend is that one of the things that I've observed in my career is that the Clean Water Act implementation pattern has been to hang quite a bit of the goal attainment through the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program, permitting program, and very much emphasizing chemical controls without taking into account the physical limitations to the extent that actually can secure the best attainable uses within these water bodies. And then just to I do want to thank the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers for making the opportunity available for stakeholders to share our thoughts. And I especially would like to extend my gratitude to be included in this particular forum and roundtable by our neighboring states and the state of Idaho stakeholders, and to invite a member that represents municipal interests. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you. I've got Amanda, Brenda, then Jeff. Amanda.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide some thoughts on this discussion block. Sound science means that science is accurate. As precipitation trends change, so also does the nature of the water sources. And the applicable science isn't necessarily keeping up. We are seeing sources change from intermittent to ephemeral. What may have once been a wetland may now look like a pothole. As sources change, we aren't seeing designations, applied science, and associated regulations change. In many instances, we're seeing over-regulation of sources that are beyond federal jurisdiction. The Army Corps and EPA regulatory system needs to recognize the need for this flexibility and the fact that precipitation trends may mean changes to applied science and in jurisdictional authority. The Army Corps and EPA regulations need to rely more on state agencies in capturing these changes and adjust accordingly, since the state agencies are more aware and familiar with these sources and their evolution. Just like I echoed in my opening comments, the state is really best positioned to work with locals and stakeholders on guiding what is best. And then in this case, from who I'm speaking for, what's best for the state of Montana, the Corps and EPA must avoid a federal one-size approach. To that end, in terms of some thoughts on how agencies can better interact with regional, state, and local interests, now and into the future, it would be helpful if they would draft a rule that clearly delineates the bounds of their jurisdiction and leave the rest to the states. States are better able to administer these programs given their familiarity with the resources and their ability to respond quickly. And it is erroneous to believe that only WOTUS are protected and regulated. Non-WOTUS are regulated just by the state on the state level. State determined, state managed is best. Adding a federal level of protection and review does not improve protections. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you. Next, I've got Brenda, and then I have Jeff, and then I don't have anyone else in the queue, so please don't hesitate to signal to me that you are interested in participating. Brenda, you are up.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to start out with the second question. How can agencies interact better with the regional, state, and local interests on WOTUS now and into the future? And rather than reiterating, much of that is the same as my comments on the second block. But I will say, I would just like to say that the clarity, consistency, and certainty are probably the most important things for that interaction, and that comes down to the local level. I appreciate what Amanda just said about the aspects of assurances in the consistency and in the definition. When we have too broad or too vague of a definition, it includes things that often can change. And again, this gets back to the fact that the local, state, and regional aspects are better equipped to have the flexibility and adaptability and still maintain what is required under the Clean Water Act by having that aspect. So I would say that the agencies can interact better by following under the Clean Water Act, but then leaving the states in charge, and especially states that have such progressive and proactive aspects as I feel Idaho does, programs that are already in place to assure that. Again, I can't state it enough, but there's no greater stakeholder in the game than those that live right there, that rely on clean water, rely on it for all of the aspects, for their economies, for drinking, for the wildlife, for the tourism, for any of that. So I do feel that that's where it's best left for the local management. In talking about the first part of sound science, this truly comes into play for us. Again, I'll refer to the definition. If it is not sound science that has been ground truth around what is truly a navigable water, if it gets too broad, if it is continuously changing, it causes problems for the stakeholders, and you cannot assure any consistency nor certainty on a national level, on a regional level, or on a local level. When things such as ditches or dirt tanks or stock tanks or the ephemeral streams are included, or in a category or in a definition without the sound science or the ground truthing around definitions, this does not lead to assurances that what your desired outcomes are on paper are going to be the ones that come out on the ground. So again, many of these things just have been much more eloquently said from previous speakers. And I just feel very, very happy to be able to represent Idaho, but also to be part of the West, where our water issues among the Western users are very much on the same page as you continue to hear from the concerns that we bring forwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Brenda. I appreciate it. Next is Jeff, and then after Jeff, I don't have anyone else in the queue. So let me know if you want to jump in on the conversation. Jeff, you are up.
Thank you. There's no doubt that sound science is essential to the implementation of WOTUS, and there is lots of hydrologic information and studies available from federal agencies, specifically the U.S. Geological Survey. It has a lot of data and modeling in Nevada for sure. For waters on public lands, the federal land management agencies have studies and water data. And then, of course, state and regional agencies as well. And there are, universities and other institutions. For example, in the state of Nevada, we have the Desert Research Institute. They've done lots of studies, have lots of data, and this is information that really needs to be used by the agencies as a basis for determining jurisdiction. I had a prior experience when I was with the Nevada Department of Transportation on planning a new highway project. And at that time, EPA required bridge structures instead of culverts over what they believed were ephemeral streams that had a connection to a river. They as I recall, EPA did not provide the data, nor did they do any kind of rigorous scientific analysis to justify that decision. So we did what we were told to do, and I guess I would say it's really important going forward to use data to make it transparent, and there are analytical tools, and all those things really need to be part of WOTUS, and I think that helps bring confidence in decision making. I would also add that having a national mapping system to support the current status of WOTUS and potential changes in jurisdictional status of water bodies using any one of a number of readily available tools like Esri or ArcInfo, I think would be a great help. And as far as other aspects or facets that should be considered by the agencies, or coordination and timely responses and determinations, and last but certainly not least is having a significant outreach effort to the general public.
Great, Jeff, thank you. So I do not have anyone else in the queue, and so I want to make some space here, folks. Additional folks want to jump in and reflect here on discussion block number 3. And so for the purposes of a refresher here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, provided I can remember how to do that. Yes, I can. And so as a reminder, here are the questions that we are asking you to reflect on discussion block number 3. So if you want to jump into the conversation, use the Zoom functionality to raise your hand, or indicate to Kelly in the room that you want to raise your hand. Terry, I see that you are up. Terry, jump in.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, I jumped ahead and gave my spiel for the second block, or the third block and the second block, but I do have a couple more things just to touch on. In Wyoming, we are actively involved in a lot of different things. The Wyoming DEQ, last year they held a collaborative learning process regarding the surface water quality standards and did their triennial review. And there were numerous folks from across the state from various entities that participated in that process. And it was a very thorough process, kind of remind you of going through a BLM resource management plan revision or a forest plan revision, looking at the words in detail. But there are a lot of things that happen at the local level there to look at sound science, and another entity in our state are the conservation districts across the state. They're constantly monitoring sedimentation in streams and different things, and working with folks. And then just with that local effort there, I think just reaching out and touching base with us at the county and state level is a good thing. So just wanted to hit on that. With other entities are out there too that are looking in the process. Thank you.
Great. Terry, thank you. Next, I have Micah from the Land of 14 Reservoirs. Micah.
Thank you. Very exciting reservoirs, I might add. A lot of activity. I do have a couple of quick points, particularly with the last question where we've asked sort of how can agencies interact better with regional, state, and local interests. And this is a roundtable. I realize that it's sort of set up as a listening session, and I can see some value potentially for EPA and the Army Corps, but if there is time, I think that we would all love to hear from EPA and the Army Corps how state agencies and local interests can better participate with the feds on these issues now and into the future as well. And so I'm not trying to steal the show here, Rob, and turn the question on our federal regulators, but I think it's important in this entire roundtable that we have both our roundtable group speak, but also hear a little bit from our EPA and Army Corps folks if they wouldn't mind sharing. So I think that we heard a lot in that last section about sort of this false dichotomy between that waters which are federally protected and those that aren't, and that there's some sort of difference in necessarily water quality. I think you've heard a lot that a lot of these states take a lot of pride and put a lot of work into protecting their waters, and so that doesn't exist. It's not either federally protected or not protected at all. We often overprotect in a sense in our states, having more extensive regulations than we would if we solely relied on the EPA. So just if there's some time and they're willing, I would love to hear from our folks. Thank you.
Yeah, and so why don't we do this? I'm going to do two things. Micah, I'm going to ask, I'm going to see if there are any other reflections or comments here on discussion block number 3. I'm going to give people that final opportunity. Then I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to ask that you restate your question without any of the context. Just restate your question so that it's clear for the folks on the live stream and it's clear to Sylvia and Elliot. Since Sylvia and Elliot, Sylvia, since I see you unmuted, I'm taking that as a signal that you're open to that. And so if not, let me know. And then I do have some other questions that Micah and Eric and Jeremiah worked as backup questions that we can come to if we've got a pause in the conversation. So first, I'm going to see anyone else have any final thoughts here on discussion block number 3? Okay, yep, Bevan, thank you, Kelly. Bevan, why don't I come to you? Then Mike, I'll come to you to rephrase the question, and then Sylvia and Elliot, I'll give you guys some space. Thank you, Kelly, for reminding me. Bevan?
Thank you, Rob. And I'll be brief because we would love to hear from our federal folks. So I'm going to start by going back to question 1. Why am I here? I made the trip because of the idea that there might be someone in government in Washington, D.C. that is willing to listen and hear what we in the Arid West think about regulatory regimes. With that being said, under the question of in regard to sound science, we've learned over the past couple of years that science is often subjective to the politics of the time. I'm very concerned with the use of science derived in the incubator of the environmental religion. Certainly when the message of the science is predetermined and the studies are designed to support that message, it creates challenges to the credibility of the science. The best way forward, in my estimation, for the EPA and the federal agencies is to return to your proper role as support entities. States, local governments have the authorities and the abilities to manage, to implement, and when needed to punish, but to secure those resources in a way that meets the goals of all of us in securing clean water and usable resources. So yeah, bring some of your money and your resources, bring your expertise, and come and give us some support. And otherwise, just stay out of the way. Thank you.
Great. Bevan, thank you. Any other thoughts here on discussion block 3? Okay, so just a couple of quick, like on the spur kind of thinking about how to run the remaining, we got about 20 minutes here. So I'm gonna have Micah, I'm gonna have you rephrase the question so we're clear what the question is that we're asking Sylvia and Elliot to reflect on. And then Sylvia and Elliot, I'll come to you. And then I'm gonna ask for the roundtable participants to reflect on what they heard from Sylvia and Elliot. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Micah, you're up.
Thank you, Rob. I will rephrase my question, which is just a reiteration of the second question there. But in the theme of Jerry Maguire, help me, help you, help us, help you. We ended with this question, the discussion block, because it is important for you to hear at the end of the discussion how you can better assist us in our management of water. Again, there's not a false dichotomy. We're all on the same team. We're all working towards water quality being good in all of our states. We rely on it. We need it. So the question there is, how can local groups, whether that's county commissioners, how can industry, how can state agencies, how can we better assist you in either a process for rulemaking or just in general? Is there a feedback loop that we can open or you can open? How can we better serve and have that interaction and that engagement with our federal folks?
Yep, Sylvia, jump in. Oh, Sylvia, are you there? Ruh-roh.
Being recorded.
Sylvia, are you there? Elliot, why don't I come to you? Looks like there might be a little Zoom challenge there. Are folks still able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Elliot?
Sure. So how can local groups and state agencies better assist the federal government in the process for rulemaking? And I think these engagement points, when I think back to Rule 1, we had outreach early on in the development of the rule, and then outreach during the rule itself. And then that was targeted to the rule, but then there were ancillary outreach efforts through non-governmental organizations, through government outreach, and having states and local groups engaging in those opportunities and providing the kind of thoughtful feedback that you are doing today is very helpful for the agencies. Because certainly all of the outreach that we've had, we've been, the federal agencies, EPA and the Army, have cast a broad net out to try and get the diverse perspectives from all of the different groups out there to help inform these efforts, to make sure that whether it's the Rule 1 or any future effort, the implementation topics that we're talking about today, to make sure that we are hearing from those different perspectives, and we're able to truly assess those and incorporate them into the decision-making processes. So kind of circling back to your question, and I see Sylvia's making gestures that it sounds like her Zoom issues are corrected. back to your question, how can local groups and state agencies better assist us? And I think it's doing exactly what you're doing right now, where you're finding the opportunities and taking advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves and engaging in not only things like this, but those other opportunities like Sylvia pointed to, the NC, the county conference that's coming up. And so those are my on the cuff thoughts, and I'll pass it over to Sylvia for more.
Yeah, my apologies all. I don't know what the heck happened there, but it always seems like it's at the crucial moment that your internet connection goes down. I think one thing that, in addition to some of the stuff that I heard Elliot saying just now, that I would stress to all of you is to be, for your state and local agencies and organizations, to be in touch with your regions, your EPA region. And I will tell you that I come from a certain point of view on this, because normally my job is I'm the regional counsel for Region 9 of EPA, which covers California, Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands. And the folks in our water division in the region, they are really the boots on the ground in terms of working with the states and kind of working with the states and headquarters in trying to make things happen. And they are good folks to be in touch with and to be reaching out to. Never hurts to reach out to headquarters, but I think there's a lot to be said for talking to the regions. The regions, like you, want good water quality, obviously, and they want your programs to work. They don't want to be in the business of, having to take over a water quality program or a water pollution program in any particular state. So they are really looking for ways to make that relationship and to make that outcome more than possible, to make it reality. One of the things I've been struck by in hearing about folks talk about the states and like the states have got this. I think there are states, and one of the examples that I've definitely heard is Wyoming, as being out there doing its own protections and going beyond what the federal government has said in terms of what's protected. But I will tell you that I've heard from a lot of states, including a state upstream from Wyoming, and probably upstream from several of you, saying, nope, our legislature has said the limit of what we can protect is the limit of what the federal government has set for protection. So the situation that some of you have in your states, where you have a state that's really going out, that understands the importance of its water, the need to protect its water for a whole bunch of reasons, because water is so scarce from your states, but also because part of what's so great about living in your states is the beautiful spaces that you have, those beautiful outdoor spaces. So water is important to that as well. I think not every state finds itself in that category. So again, I would emphasize reaching out to the regions. I just think it's really important. I'm thinking, Micah, remind me, did I miss something else that you were asking there?
Rob, am I okay to hop in? No, I don't think so. I think generally speaking, just having some more feedback from you is helpful. So not again to steal any other thunder, but I did really enjoy hearing your comments on some of the things that you heard as well. I think Rob's plan is to let everyone speak on what you've just stated. So thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Elliot. So we've got, so I'm going to take about 12 minutes here, about 3 minutes to I'm going to leave 3 minutes for any final wrap up stuff. And so we've got 12 minutes to work with. I've got 3 people in the queue. I've got Terry, Joanna, then Brenda. Terry.
Thank you, Rob. Just a couple comments on the experiences that I've had over the last 20 years as a county commissioner. Back in the early 2000s, I was a cooperator on the Bighorn Forest Plan revision. Then later on in about 2007, 2008, 2009 timeframe, I was a cooperator representing the Bighorn Basin for our county and BLM Resource Management Plan revision. And the working relationships that I've had the opportunity to build with those agencies, although we still butt heads at times on certain issues, has been very helpful. I can't count the number of times that those agencies call me on my personal cell phone, and I've invited them to, and we go out on the ground, look at things and work on things. And that is the working relationship that I think is important to develop with these federal agencies. And Sylvia, your comment to reach out is good, but I think you as an agency should come to the local level and reach out yourselves and be a part of the solution, because it sometimes at times can be part of the problem. So I say that not to be critical, but want to be to the point that we can work together on issues there, and it just need to be stand up and be strong about things there and not be offended about issues there by calling something out. But I've done that with the BLM and the Forest Service, and like I said, it's been a great working relationship over time, and it's taken many years to get to that point. And the problem is you have so much turnover in all these agencies that you just get that built together, and then things work, and then poof, somebody else moves in with a different attitude, you start from scratch again. But what I found with locally and where I'm at and up to the state level there is that even though some folks come in that might have a different outlook on things, the working relationships that we as commissioners and folks on the ground have made with those agencies has been helpful, and that has been passed on to the new people coming in. So that would be my suggestion to the EPA and the Corps is it's a two-way street, not just us reach out to you and hope for a good response. Thank you.
Terry, thank you. Joanna, you are up, and then Brenda, you are up. Joanna?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, innovation moves at the speed of trust. So at the limit does not mean less than the limit. At the current federal requirements and at the level of management, regulation, and control of the federal requirements does not mean that we're doing less. And in fact, in that, because I'm speaking on behalf of the state of Idaho, directly to the direction that our political leadership has provided us for many years with regards to the Clean Water Act and these federal rules and laws, and our need to be at the point where we are complying. Now, that's our state policy. Our members, the Association of Idaho City members, we do so much more than the bare minimum. The fact that the state has a bare minimum threshold does not, and in fact, it's not a bare minimum. It is a sufficient minimum. And there may be other stakeholders in the room that may want to speak to that. But our members are developing innovation solutions that go way above the minimum federal requirements for water quality management. Dixie Drain here in the Lower Boise River is just one example that I'll provide due to the shortness of time, where one of our members is controlling the pollutants that are coming from other folks. They're not receiving trade credits, they're not receiving anything, but they are removing over 150% of what the data shows actually required to comply under the Clean Water Act, and they're voluntarily and knowingly doing more. Arsenic, the update to the arsenic criteria for the state of Idaho, the first in the nation that is now not based on the MCL. We needed to reach out to EPA to get support for the development of reasonable common sense criteria that can be complied with here in the state of Idaho, because we're talking about fish tissue, and it is a complicated update and a complicated criteria that I won't go into detail here. But I guess I'd like to let everybody know that the state of Idaho has been very active and believes very strongly in the protection of the water quality. And the innovation that we need here is really going to be based on trust. Having EPA Region 10 engaged with the state of Idaho in a productive, positive way is something that we all desire. Thank you.
Okay, Joanna, thank you. Brenda, you are up.
Thank you, Rob. I would just like to extend appreciation for both Elliot and Sylvia taking time to answer these questions. I think as we work through this process, it was really important for us to be able to hear your thoughts on that. And I appreciate, Sylvia, the aspect to reach out to the region, because that is a little bit closer and that makes sense. However, I would just like to add that although that's a good thought process, I still would reiterate many of the comments you've heard today and the comments that I've made previously about getting down to the state, what Wyoming has just said, what Johanna just talked about, and then even down to even the more local levels. That's where the rubber is going to meet the road as far as assuring that we're in compliance. I would, just because I am from Idaho, I'd have to contend that we're right there running with Wyoming as far as our water quality practices. We've been very proactive and very progressive in addressing not only the ag industry or point source pollutions, or as I talked about, serving on the Owyhee River TMDL Water Advisory Group, making sure that those tributaries that feed into the Snake River are meeting their TMDL requirements. We've been very proactive on that. And that has been successful because these groups bring in a wide variety of stakeholders. We not only bring in the communities or the cities or the ag industries that have to comply with the Clean Water Act and also with our state regulations to talk about these conversations, but we bring in recreation and the wildlife communities and conservation districts, and those are the kind of successful aspects that are going to make sure that water quality is meeting what is required by the Clean Water Act. Again, that consistency, clarity, and collaboration. Voluntarily meeting these requirements is always more successful than a hammer approach for several reasons. A lot of it is just because these communities, whether it's a city such as Boise or a small town such as Murphy, which is the county seat in Owyhee, it's the right thing to do, and their livelihood and sustainability depend on this. So I just would counter a little bit that although it is good to be able to go to a regional aspect, as you stated, that's closer than going to a DC level. I still think we need to get down to where we have that flexibility and allowing the states to work on their levels, and especially looking at what the states have in place. So thank you for that opportunity.
Brenda, thank you. So we have space maybe for two more comments. I don't have anyone in the queue, so I invite folks to raise their hand. Actually, at this point, why don't we just jump in? If you're on Zoom and you want to speak up, just unmute yourself and jump into the conversation. And if you are in person, you can just head to the podium.
I guess, Rob, I just like to say one thing, which is I hope my colleagues and friends in Idaho didn't take what I was saying amiss as being a criticism of Idaho. It certainly wasn't intended that way. I've been really impressed by the stories that you guys have told about the things that you are doing in the state in terms of water quality, protection of your water resources, which are so essential to you. So I apologize if you thought that I was being critical of you. That was certainly not my intent.
Yep, so I've got Micah, you're going to go, and then Eric, I'll come to you for any closing thoughts, and then Sylvia and Elliot, I'll afford you the same luxury. Micah?
Thank you, and Sylvia, I am not from Idaho, but you are already forgiven. That is the joy of these roundtables. We all get to say things, and it's good hearing from you too. The unscripted version, answering questions, it's really important. It is. That's why it's exciting to have a roundtable with you. I can't speak on behalf of the state of Idaho, but we are very glad to be able to hear your comments. The other thing I'll say is that water generally flows downhill. So luckily in Wyoming, we start the fun for some of these basins. So I think there might be some places where we get some water along the state lines, but we are flowing mostly downhill here. But I do want to say generally on behalf of our entire group, thank you for being here. Thank you for saving us for last. It did allow us to look at some of your other roundtables and sort of learn from those. And most importantly, though, thank you for committing. I'm taking it as a commitment as an attorney. You said it out loud, so therefore it is going to happen. Following up with us. Because I think if I've learned anything at the roundtable today is that we have a lot of things that we can still work through, whether that's regionally, whether that's nationally. And so I really do appreciate your commitment to that. Although we had to move the roundtable to Boise, We, of course, would love to have you in Wyoming. So if you're ever around, let us know. I'm more than happy to show you some of our beautiful water resources, our clean water resources. So thank you for making the time. And if there's any way that we can further support efforts with EPA or the Army Corps, let us know. And I will be following up with you, Sylvia, on NACO. Hopefully you are you going to be the actual person there, or should we expect someone else?
Yeah, the pressure is on. This is a tough group, I'll tell you. So I was supposed to be back, speaking of the land of 10,000 lakes, I was supposed to be back for a family get together right at that time, but I'm gonna see if I can persuade my family to cut me a little slack on that one. So wish me luck.
Good luck.
Great. Thank you, Micah. Eric, why don't I go to you now?
Thanks, Rob. I think we're froze up on our end, so I hope this all works. I just wanted to thank you, Rob and Janelle, for the facilitation. I think you guys have done an excellent job. Sylvia and Elliot, I can't imagine what sitting through 10 of these is like, and I too am glad that you saved us for last. One other thing, you notice that nobody from Montana got to the mic and started bragging, but I think Montana is the only one of us that has a constitutional provision for a clean and healthful environment. So we want to be added to that list of good doers as well, in a non-bragging way, because we don't brag in Montana. I also want to say appreciation for all the folks that pulled this thing together. Wyoming for starting it, Jeremiah and his crew, Seth and your crew for hosting us here at the last minute and feeding us. You don't know in Zoom land, but they brought in food for us so we didn't starve while we were sitting through. But most importantly, for all the participants, Zoom and in person, and the due diligence that you guys did getting ready and prepped to have this conversation. I hope it was, I know it was important for you because y'all showed up and did it. I hope it was eventful for you and that we can follow up, Sylvia, with EPA and continue to build those relationships and connections going forward. I'm not going to let this drop. Took me 3 days to get here and back for a 2-hour meeting, and I'm going to make it worth our time. So other comments, other questions, other documents, other written testimony, anything that this group wants to submit for further back and forth with EPA, get them to me, and we'll make sure that we get them to the right folks through Sylvia, through DC, or whatever other contacts we have with EPA. And so with that, we're right on time, but we're actually a little bit early. The other thing I wanted to say before we started talking too much at the end, in the West, we like to start our meetings on time, and we generally like to end our meetings early. And we are friendly and we are blunt. And so I hope EPA, you take that with a grain of salt. This was a very friendly conversation from a group of folks that spent a good deal of time getting ready to present to you. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Sylvia, any final thoughts? And then Elliot, I'll come to you for any final thoughts.
Well, I think Eric summed it up very nicely. He captured my main tenets for running a meeting. I'll tell you that right now. It better be pretty important if you're going to go the full time, especially if you're talking about 2.5 hours. And this is pretty important. I really appreciate all the time and your frankness with us in terms of what the issues are for you, your concerns, and your ideas. It's been terrific to hear from you, and I don't have any problem with frankness in case you haven't already figured that out. So I just want to make sure that I get all my thank yous in to everybody that I owe thank yous to. To you, Eric, and to you, Micah and Jeremiah. And I think you also mentioned Seth is helping out there on the conference room. And want to thank you and your organizations for putting this together and making this happen. This has been a great roundtable. I've really enjoyed it. And again, I've really enjoyed hearing from all of you and your thoughts and ideas. I guess one thing that I want to mention real quickly, and I see we're at time, so I don't want to run on too long, but Colin, you expressed some concern about what I said at the beginning about wanting to take actions now. I wasn't talking about doing a rulemaking tomorrow or anything like that. That's not what I had in mind. What I was thinking about was what can we do with the program now and the way that we're carrying it out. And we heard about ideas about being more consistent in other stories and concerns about taking time. It's like, how can we fix this, how we're doing things now, whatever happens with the rulemakings, and if there's litigation and challenges and all the stuff that seems to go with rulemakings these days, what is it that we can do now to make our programs work better, our permitting programs, and how we're doing things under the Clean Water Act? It's a pretty cool act, I think. And we may have disagreements about it, but it's done some amazing things for our country, especially those of you who are perhaps a little bit more on my end of the age range than others. I mean, it's made a huge difference. Last thing I want to say is thank you, Rob and Janelle, for the great work that you've done on all these roundtables. We could not have done it without you. You have been amazing. So thanks again to everybody. And let me just turn it over real quickly to you, Elliot, to see if you have any last words you'd like to put in there.
Yeah, just a couple last thoughts, and I do agree with you, Sylvia. There was I want to thank the Wyoming County Commissioner Association for putting together the roundtable and all the participants. It's very clear that you, by the collective discussion, that you know and truly value and have a passion for the water resources in your region. You came prepared to share your ideas and share them frankly, and we really appreciate that. Your comments on the implementation and how all of this manifests itself in your region is very helpful to us. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the Assistant Secretary Connor and Principal Deputy Pinkham. I do want to thank everybody for your participation in this roundtable. We really appreciate your input and the context that you bring to the table. So thank you again, and we hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and an especially great weekend.
Great. Meeting adjourned, everyone. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.